Mary, how does the man perform?
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
This bill is the single most dangerous bill this committee has ever considered. This bill is designed to corrupt the election process permanently, and it is a brazen and shameless power grab by Democrats. They do this by instituting a bill that will promote widespread fraud and illegal voting. Apparently, the Democrats have determined that if millions of illegal aliens get to vote, if millions of criminals get to vote, that will benefit Democrats because they understand that criminals and illegal aliens are much, much more likely to vote for Democrats.
Okay, so you know what that is right there? That's called lying. That's called lying, everybody. Hi. Oh, lying. Biden just gave his very first press conference. It was very, very substantial. It was long. Brett and I were commenting on how we were all holding our breath. So, you know, in case he stuttered, for God's sake, okay? In case he stuttered. And, you know, he has a problem, right? Because if he stuttered or anything, then Fox News, you know, would just go crazy. But how relieved we were that we knew he wasn't lying to our faces like Ted Cruz did just there. Oh, my God. So, yes, you wonder if Biden's going to get it wrong or if he's going to say it wrong or if it's not going to be, you know, but it's better than wondering if Trump was ever going to say anything right or if Trump was ever going to say anything that wasn't right out of the Nazi playbook or if Trump was going to say anything that, you know, he couldn't do quickly. Do you know what I'm saying? So, you know, watching the Trump press conferences, which, by the way, you know, the media is so dishonest with you. Sometimes you just want to scream. They were saying, oh, why didn't Biden have a press conference before now? And where was Biden's press conference? And, you know, Obama did one 30 days in and Trump did one, you know, 27 days in. And why is Biden waiting? And why is Biden waiting? You know, Donald Trump didn't do a press conference for the last 300 days of his presidency. No one ever freaking mentions that. He just stopped doing that, and he didn't even have, you know, press briefings, okay? He went through so many, you know, Sean Spicer and then Brett's girlfriend. She came and went. Now she's going to run for governor, you know. Sarah Honey Boo Boo. She's going to run for Boo Boo for governor. Anyway, we went through so many freaking people, Kayleigh McEnany, on, and none of them were capable of telling the truth because the truth did not flatter the former guy. Just wasn't flattering what was going. There was no infrastructure bill, no health care bill. Nothing was happening quickly. Nothing was happening effectively. You know, COVID was being lied about. We were told hydroxychloroquine. So, you know what I mean? He just stopped talking to the press and started tweeting like a madman because that's what he is. So we had a press conference today, and it was very substantive. I mean, we heard questions from every news organization having to do with the filibuster, having to do with guns, having to do with immigration reform, having to do with voting, having to do with, you name it, whatever. And let me tell you something. Biden commented on what the Republicans were doing and are trying to do, using the big lie that there was somehow voter fraud, which we all know there was not. Didn't happen. The premise that we need a solution to a problem that doesn't exist is getting us down this really bad road of voter suppression, right? And it's causing Ted Cruz to sit there and lie. It's causing Mitch McConnell to sit there and lie. It's causing all of these Republicans to lie about a solution that they say we need for a problem we do not have. And really what you need to understand is that voter suppression isn't a response to anything. It's the Republican strategy for winning elections because that is the only strategy that they have. They're not changing their message. They're not doing anything to do immigration reform. And until and unless we do immigration reform, and until and unless when we see a hurricane slamming into Central American countries with very barely hanging on infrastructure, with a bare minimum of an electric grid, with a bare minimum of water control or dams or anything, and we see entire countries being washed away, and we sit there and do nothing to help them, nothing at all. Don't you know that we're going to have massive migration? And this is just the beginning of climate change. This is just, this year's surge at the border. This is all because of climate change. And you could expect massive changes in immigration all around the world, including here in our own country, as climate change starts to demolish, places with one tornado after another tornado after another tornado, one hurricane after another hurricane after another hurricane, one, flood after another flood after another flood. I mean, rising water, all the. So, Biden was asked about all this, and he was just very honest about all of that, saying, you can't just watch two hurricanes slam into Central America, sit back and do nothing and not expect to see an influx of people having to say to their children, your dad is in the United States. I'm so sorry that we have to do this, but there's no way that I could feed you. There's no way that I can clothe you. There's no way that I can protect you here. So you're going to join this group, and they're going to lead you to the American border. And when you get there, dad's phone number or your aunt's phone number or your uncle's phone number or grandpa's phone number or grandma's phone number or your mom's phone number is going to be written inside your pocket, and you show this to them. I mean, it was honest, and it was, but I have to say, on the voting suppression thing, this really got to me. So they asked the president of the United States about voter suppression. And I swear to God, this is the angriest I've ever seen Joe Biden, okay?
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. It's all designed, and I'm going to spend my time doing three things. One, trying to figure out how to pass the legislation passed by the House.
HR one.
Number one. Number two, educating the American public. The Republican voters I know find this despicable.
Yeah.
Republican voters. The folks outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this, because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do. And it cannot be sustained. And do everything in my power, along with my friends in the House and the Senate, to keep that from becoming the law.
Yeah, and he was asked about the filibuster, and he said, look, I don't have a bad record of getting things through the Senate. I don't have a bad record of being bipartisan, and I don't have a bad record of reaching across the aisle. Okay, but if I can't, then we'll have to approach it in another way. We'll have to do something in another way, because the filibuster has been used 5 times more than it was after its original invention. And it was an invention. It's not in the Constitution. And primarily to stop progress on civil rights. And he's totally aware of that and understands that if this H.R. 1, which is S1 in the Senate, same bill, is filibustered, he's going to have to go about it in another way. And I believe that our solution, which was to carve out a no filibuster rule for civil rights bills, would be the best.
all things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, The Randi Rhodes Show.
If all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
That was Obama at John Lewis's funeral. And as you know, there are two bills. One is a companion to the other. There is H.R. 1 and H.R. 4. H.R. 1 is the For the People Act, and it does a few really important things. It creates a public funding mechanism for House seats, right, funded by criminal penalties and civil penalties paid by corrupt corporations who are adjudicated guilty or plead guilty to fraud or financial crimes. 2, it actually secures the vote for anybody who is an American citizen who would like to vote. 3, it actually has some ethical requirements in there for conducting our elections and for running for office. You know, for example, if you want to run for president, H.R. 1 provides that you do have to release 10 years of your tax return. You see what I mean? So that is a very broad bill that does immense fixing of the system under which we elect people in this here country. It's important, it's necessary, and you can tell that it's necessary because we have more than 250 bills in 43 states trying to suppress voters in states that had absolutely no reason to go down that road, like Iowa, where Donald Trump won. Okay, Atlanta, in Georgia today, they are voting to pass this freaking bill that would, end. It would make optional weekend voting. It would make, optional Sunday souls to the polls. They backed off banning Sunday voting because there was such an outcry. And now they're saying, well, you can make it optional in your particular district. I mean, this is so sad. There is no need to do any of this. There is no need to limit the number of drop boxes that are available in Texas. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's a ridiculous voter suppression strategy that the GOP has. And I'll tell you why they have this as a strategy. In a nutshell, they don't have any ideas for ordinary voters, okay? They have no ideas for working people. But the second big thing that they are very well aware of is they have really bad candidates, and the Senate is in trouble, okay? The Senate is in trouble. They have this really bad candidate in Missouri who's running to replace Roy Blunt, okay? Roy Blunt just said he's retiring. And so that should be a gimme for a decent Republican candidate. They're going to run their disgraced ex-governor who had to resign in shame after he was physically and sexually abusing a hairdresser outside of his marriage, and he was impeached. He's now going to be the person who's going to run for the Republican Senate nomination in Missouri. And in freaking Alabama, you got Richard Shelby that's retiring. And Mo Brooks, the guy that was telling people on January 6th to go in there, take names and kick some ass and overthrow the results of the election at the, Save America, whatever that stupid rally was that preceded the insurrection at the Capitol. Mo Brooks is now going to try and run. Mo Brooks has run statewide before, and he failed miserably. So they know they're in trouble. They know they have really awful, terrible candidates. Alabama, they put up terrible candidates anyway. I mean, they had Roy Moore. This is how Doug Jones, the Democrat, won. This is how he won. So now all of a sudden they're going to have Mo Brooks, who does not, people don't like him. He doesn't do well with Republicans in Alabama. He is a person who tried to cancel the votes of many people in this country. So Ted Cruz too. You have to remember, if you're wondering whether or not they're lying to you about, H.R. 1 and whether or not it's good to have a president release 10 years of tax returns ahead of, becoming the nominee, or whether you think public funding of congressional candidates is a good idea, or if you think that automatic voter registration when you get your driver's license is a good idea, or, any citizen of the United States can, get registered easily with, minimal effort on the day of the election. If you're wondering whether or not this is a good idea, just remember that the Republican Party had 147 of its members after the insurrection object to your votes that were already certified by your secretaries of state from being counted. Just remember that their strategy in this last presidential election was not to accept the votes of millions of Americans after there was violence at the Capitol, after a police officer was killed, after 5 other people died. They still stood on that floor and they still objected to accepting the results of the Electoral College, even though those electors have been certified in their own states by their own secretaries of state who happen to be Republican. Just remember who is out to cancel you. And that's why Biden got so, I'll say, exercised. Why he got and called this attempt to suppress votes and cancel the results of elections sick. Because anybody and everybody who looked at what happened at the Capitol, including Republicans, of not the elected ones, oh no, people out in the country understood what was going on there. They understood, and when they heard the phone call where Donald Trump was calling, and we only heard, phone calls to Georgia. We don't even know. What did he say to Pennsylvania? What did he say to Arizona? We don't know. But trust me, the call to the Secretary of State of Georgia wasn't the only call that Donald Trump made, threatening them that it's not smart. I don't think it's smart for you to go down this road and certify this election. I don't think it's smart. I wouldn't do it if I were you. This mob talk. I don't think that was the only state he called. That's just me. So Biden said this voter suppression effort by the Republicans is sick. And then he was asked, well, what about, they're going to filibuster any effort that there is to get H.R. 1 and S1, to be made the law to protect people who want to vote. And here was his answer.
It used to be required for the filibuster, and I had a card on this. I was going to give you the statistics, but you probably know them. That it used to be that from between 1917 and 1971, the filibuster existed. There were a total of 58 motions to break a filibuster. That whole time. Last year alone, there were 5 times that many. So it's being abused in a gigantic way. And for example, it used to be you had to stand there and talk and talk and talk and talk until you collapsed. And guess what? People got tired of talking and tired of collapsing. Filibusters broke down and we were able to break the filibuster, get a quorum and vote. So I strongly support moving in that direction, in addition to having an open mind about dealing with certain things that are just elemental to the functioning of our democracy, like the right to vote.
Hello.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Like the basic right to vote.
Right.
We've amended the filibuster in the past. But here's the deal.
Yes.
As you observed, I'm a fairly practical guy. I want to get things done. I want to get them done consistent with what we promised the American people. And in order to do that, in a 50-50 Senate, we've got to get to the place where I get 50 votes so that the Vice President of the United States can break the tie, or I get 51 votes without her. And so I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway. We're going to get a lot done. And if we have to, if there's complete lockdown and chaos as a consequence of the filibuster, then we'll have to go beyond what I'm talking about.
So he's open. He's open to at least amending the filibuster so that they have to stand there. He is aware that the filibuster has been used to stop progress on the issues of civil rights over and over and over and over again, and that it is a relic of the Jim Crow era. He actually is disgusted at the lies that are being told about the voter suppression efforts that are being undertaken by the Republican Party in 43 states across this nation. He's appalled at the lack of cooperation on securing free and fair elections for every American in this here country by virtue of getting money out of politics, by virtue of making a president or a nominee for a party's nomination for president disclose 10 years of tax returns. He's just disgusted at the amount of lying that's gone on with regard to the claims about what H.R. 1 and S1 and H.R. 4, which is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that's the companion bill. He's just appalled at the kinds of lies that they are telling the American people. And you should be appalled at the kinds of lies they're telling the American people, because the only reason why Ted Cruz and the only reason why Mitch McConnell yesterday, disgusting. They are not trying to suppress votes.
The turnout in the 2020 election was the highest since 1900. States are not engaging in trying to suppress voters whatsoever. This is clearly an effort by one party to rewrite the rules of our political system.
This is a lie. What this is the Republicans saying that because we had high voter turnout in 2020, because it was record-setting turnout in 2020, we have to put obstacles between people and their ballots. It is the exact opposite of what he is saying they are for. Ted Cruz, I just played you. He said, under this bill, there's automatic registration of anybody. If you get a driver's license, if you get a welfare payment, if you get an unemployment payment, if you attend a public university. Now, everyone knows there are millions of illegal aliens who have driver's license, who are getting welfare benefits, who attend public universities. Well, it's not true that this bill automatically registers anyone to vote. If you are not a U.S. citizen, if you are an undocumented immigrant, you are prohibited under this bill and our current law and any law that we would have going forward. Because if we didn't have a prohibition on non-citizens voting, it would fail at the Supreme Court. It would fail. And everybody knows that. So there is no way that this registers people who are not citizens. The bill does not allow for people who are not citizens to vote in our elections. In fact, in Michigan, where there is automatic voter registration, just saying plenty of states have automatic voter registration. In Michigan, there are 6 different checks to ensure that only eligible voters get registered. So it actually increases the accuracy of the voter rolls, not the other way around. It can actually prohibit a prohibited voter from being allowed to register. So why are they lying?
The bill is designed to corrupt the election process permanently. And it is a brazen and shameless power grab by Democrats. It speaks volumes that this is H.R. 1 and S1, that the number one priority of Democrats is not COVID, it's not immunizations, it's not getting people back to work, it's not getting kids back in school, it's keeping Democrats in power for 100 years.
Okay, I believe the very first bill that Biden worked his heart out on, I believe the very first bill that was passed into law, I believe if you look in your bank accounts, you will see the results of that very first bill that was passed into law, as the very first focus of the Biden administration had to do with COVID. And it had to do with a rescue package for people who, through no fault of their own, lost their jobs and needed vaccines, etc. And the very first package that was passed into law by Joe Biden's administration through the House and the Senate without one single Republican vote. And they had to use the process we all now know is called reconciliation in order to lower the threshold from a filibusterable thing to a 51 vote majority only vote was reconciliation, and it passed without one single Republican. And now he's sitting there on his hind legs like the dog he is, claiming that COVID was not a focus of the Biden administration, that he's not concerned with opening schools, that he's not concerned with vaccinations, that he's not concerned with relief for the people who were hurt during this freaking pandemic due to a dereliction of duty by the previous administration. Oh my God, just listen to that line. I mean, it is just so sick. And he says it with such indignance, as if it's true.
The majority of Democrats is not COVID, it's not immunizations, it's not getting people back to work,
What?
It's not getting kids back in school, it's keeping Democrats in power for 100 years.
You lying
And how do they do this? They do this by instituting a bill that will promote widespread fraud and illegal voting.
Oh my God.
Under this bill, there's automatic registration of anybody if you get a driver's license,
Oh my God.
if you get a welfare payment, if you get an unemployment payment, if you attend a public university. Now, everyone knows there are millions of illegal aliens who have driver's licenses, who are getting welfare benefits, who attend public universities. This bill is designed to register every one of those illegal aliens.
He's sick. He's a sick, twisted freak of a man. He has absolutely no shame and no ability to tell the truth, no desire to tell the truth. This is all a lie. Listen, only citizens would ever be eligible to be registered to vote in this here country, okay? What H.R. 1 actually says is that if you are a U.S. citizen, there are all different checks to make sure that you are, number one. Number two, if you are a U.S. citizen and you do have a driver's license, that you will be registered to vote unless you opt out. That's too much participation for Ted Cruz, so he has to lie about it.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, here's Biden on immigration.
Well, look, I guess I should be flattered. People are coming because I'm the nice guy. That's the reason why it's happening. That I'm a decent man, or however it's phrased. That, that's why they're coming, because Biden's a good guy. Truth of the matter is, nothing has changed. As many people came, 28% increase in children to the border in my administration, 31% in the last year in 2019 before the pandemic in the Trump administration. It happens every single solitary year.
Told you.
There is a significant increase in the number of people coming to the border in the winter months of January, February, March. It happens every year. In addition to that, there is and by the way, does anybody suggest that there was a 31% increase under Trump because he was a nice guy and he was doing good things at the border? That's not the reason they're coming. The reason they're coming is that it's the time they can travel with the least likelihood of dying on the way because of the heat in the desert, number one. Number two, they're coming because of the circumstances in country. In country. The way to deal with this problem, and I started to deal with it back when I was United States Vice President, putting together a bipartisan plan of over $700 million to do with the root causes of why people are leaving. What did Trump do? He eliminated that funding.
Yep.
He didn't use it. He didn't do it. And in addition to that, what he did, he dismantled all the elements that exist to deal with what had been a problem and has been continued to be a problem for a long time. He, in fact, shut down the number of beds available. He did not fund HHS to get the children out of those Border Patrol facilities where they should not be and not supposed to be more than a few days, a little while. But he dismantled all of that. And so what we're doing now is attempting to rebuild rebuild the system that can accommodate what is happening today. And I'd like to think it's because I'm a nice guy, but it's not.
Yeah, and he told you. He told you that the $700 million in aid that we used to give to these Northern Triangle countries has not been spent. And you would think when they had these massive hurricanes, that would have been a good time to spend some money there to help them weather the storm, literally weather the storm. But now, yes, you're right. He's not going to leave children to die. He is deporting families. He is deporting the adults. Now, there are some families that we hear are allowed to come in, and he was asked about that. Why are some families allowed to come in? And he said it's because Mexico won't take them back. And now Kamala Harris has been tasked with her very first major portfolio item. She is now going to do what Biden was tasked to do when Obama had Biden as his vice president. Her portfolio will now include Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And she is going to be able to go there and give $700 million in aid for infrastructure projects, not to these corrupt regimes, but to NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to humans, to people to feed their children, for humans, for people to get work building back their roads, bridges, building back their dams, holding the water back, rebuilding their homes. I don't know if you've ever been there. I don't know if you understand what it looks like there. And then he was asked by, I guess her name's Vega, Suzanne Vega, and Suzanne Vega's she's a recording artist. You see how my mind works. She's a reporter, and she was just down at the border, and she had seen 9 and 10-year-olds who were walking with a group of other children and a couple of adults for a month to get here. And it broke her heart because they're 9 and 10 years old. And she asked Joe Biden, what about them? And he said, surprise, I'm not going to let them die. Surprise.
You just listed the reasons that people are coming, talking about in-country problems, saying that it happens every year. You blamed the last administration. Sir, I just got back last night from a reporting trip to the border where I met 9-year-old Josel, who walked here from Honduras by himself, along with another little boy. He had that phone number on him, and we were able to call his family. His mother says that she sent her son to this country because she believes that you are not deporting unaccompanied minors like her son. That's why she sent him alone from Honduras. So, sir, you blame the last administration, but is your messaging in saying that these children are and will be allowed to stay in this country and work their way through this process, encouraging families like Josel's to come?
Well, look, the idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let him starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. That's why I've asked the Vice President of the United States yesterday to be the lead person on dealing with focusing on the fundamental reasons why people leave Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador in the first place.
Thank you. Thank you. That's called decency, is what that is. That's called their children. Their children. And I'm not going to leave them in squalor to die in the desert or on the Mexican side of the border in disgusting, filthy camps. Okay? They're 9. They're 9-year-old children. They have relatives here. And I'm not going to let them die on my watch. The adults are going back. The families are going back because they can take the children with them. The adults can. But the children who come here unaccompanied, because they have a relative in the United States already, or because their parents cannot feed them anymore, cannot clothe them anymore, cannot function anymore, and they send them on this journey in these groups after a relative in the United States has sent back money to that family to pay for the journey that child will go on in a group with a coyote or in a group with an adult. I'm not going to let them die. No other administration has ever said that they would, except for Donald Trump. And I am not joining him in letting children die. It's not going to happen. So, there are people in this audience that sometimes say to me that they can't tell the difference between the parties and that the Democrats are just the same as the Republicans. And there are even progressives who are, I don't know, they've lost their ability to logically compare and contrast. And they just bitch and moan and whine. And I get very frustrated with them because the difference is so pronounced. In just this little hour here, we have shown you that the Republicans are shocked that they get accused of voter suppression because they are dramatically trying to suppress voters. Shocked they are. And that they will sit there and lie about a solution that is not needed because there is no problem. And then we showed you Biden's press conference where he was asked about that and had concrete answers, a plan in mind, a way forward that was doable in his best guesstimate, that he would try for bipartisan solutions to the voting crap that's going on, which is sick in his description. But if it can't be accomplished, he will create a carve-out at least for the filibuster and civil rights legislation. And now we've just shown you the difference between Republicans who say children can die in the desert on my watch, children can be separated from their parents on my watch, that my immigration policy is cruelty, that cruelty is the point, because I'm pursuing a deterrence policy that doesn't work. But cruelty is the point of it, with a president who says, I am not letting 9-year-olds die on my watch. Okay? We will take care of them.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
At the border, we're with authorities on patrol, and the children just keep coming.
¿De dónde vienes? Honduras.
This family telling me they've been traveling for more than a month, walking most of the way.
Cansado, ¿verdad? No?
He tells me he's not tired. He says he's ready to keep walking.
¿Listo para caminar más? ¿Sí?
And just up the road, an even larger group. In it, these two boys, 9 and 10 years old, both traveling alone, walking for more than a month. The group has taken them in, promising to keep them safe. The boys show me phone numbers of family members in the U.S. they soon hope to find. One written on a hat.
This is his grandfather's phone number.
The other written inside his pocket.
It's right here in his pants. ¿Tienen miedo?
I ask, are you scared? Yes, they tell me, very.
Hey, let's let them starve. That's the American way. Yeah, I know. There are people that are literally calling up, screaming, cursing. We can't put them on the air because they won't stop cursing. Who think that, I guess people who fled Nazi Germany and tried to come here should have been sent back. I guess that's what they think. Or, people who are persecuted in their own countries, for their religious beliefs, who come here seeking asylum and get it, should be sent back to, be sacrificed at the altar of, communism or fascism or Nazi. I don't know, but short memory theater is what goes on in this country. Short memory theater, because unless you're a first American, unless you're a Native American, you ain't American. You're just not. Your people immigrated here. And yeah, but we went through Ellis Island. Yeah, show me that. Show me that. Because there's a lot of people that didn't. A lot of people just didn't go through Ellis Island. And they're here. They're here and they're prospering, and God love you. You know what I mean? But no, we don't extend that to children. We just don't. No. We hate them. We hate children. That's a great way to live your life. Go with God, I guess. Go with God. So, Biden told us today that he does not apologize for reversing the separate women and children policy at the border. And no, he's not going to let them die. And there are people in this audience that are like, he should let them die. Seriously, they call up, and Brent goes, I'll put you on the air. Just don't stop cursing. Stop and they can't. They can't. They call me an F and whatever. And he's like, I can't put you on the air if you're going to. We have to follow FCC regulations. We cannot have you and your foul mouth all over the air. But they just can't stop. Their cruelty is just insane. And, if cruelty as a policy worked, we wouldn't have it this year. We wouldn't have immigration this year. It would have stopped. Guess what? It didn't work. Cruelty as a policy doesn't work. Because here it is, March, and we have an influx of unaccompanied children again. No, what works is actually getting to the root cause of why they have to leave in the first freaking place. So anyway, I just wanted to bring your attention. Now, if immigration pisses you off, you're going to love this gun conversation. You're going to love it.
Nothing gets them frothy more than the immigration and the guns, and we're combining them today, which I love.
I love that. Because it's all about death for them. You understand? COVID was about death, too. COVID was about a death cult. It was like, I'm willing to die for the stock market. I mean, you had Republican, Lieutenant Governor of Texas. You had Republicans saying, die for the American way of life. Just die. Just go out there, go to work and die. And making masks political. I mean, it's just so. And then we changed presidents. And now, lo and behold, we have, injections going into arms. Almost 2.5 million injections each day, every day. Sometimes we make it to 3 million injections in people's arms in this country. We sent relief checks out to get people through the clock that starts when you get your first vaccine. I mean, I'm in the middle, right? I got a vaccine 1, but I haven't gotten vaccine 2. And vaccine 1 is not providing me with the kind of protection that it will in a few days, right? It takes 14 to 28 days for the first vaccine to give you some protection from, from hospitalization from COVID, right? From, serious, severe COVID. So I'm still waiting for that. So, whatever. And then I'll get the second vaccine, and then another clock starts ticking, and you got to wait, 3 weeks after that until you get to the point where you're okay to be in a room with other vaccinated people, which is what I'm waiting for. So here we have a president who changed policies from the cruelty president, and we're actually getting there. We're actually coming out of the dark. I finally see the light now, and it's shining on me. Shine the light, see the light, shine the light. I don't know why Gloria Estefan is on my mind today, but she was. I was thinking of her in the car today, coming here. Like, what? I don't know. I was. Anyway, that's why I was thinking of, Suzanne Vega instead of Cecilia Vega, the ABC reporter that put that report together that I just showed you. That's her reporting from ABC. Anyway, so the gun thing also, okay, this is incredible. Yesterday, as we were talking about how these weapons of war shouldn't, be anywhere in American society, okay? It's just not in the public interest to have people walking around with these weapons of war that are designed to kill the most people in the shortest period of time, which is why they were invented in the first place. But they're walking into supermarkets with them, right? Well, there was another story yesterday. This is unbelievable, that a man in Atlanta, in a Publix grocery store in Atlanta, was seen going into the bathroom by another shopper. A guy named Charles Russell was shopping in Publix in Atlanta. Now, Publix is what we have here too, okay? So he saw this guy at about 1:30 go into the bathroom carrying weaponry and a cache of ammunition. And so he went to the customer service desk at the Atlanta, where they just had this massacre in 3 spas, right? 3 massage spas. And so he was, very alert to it and went to the customer service counter because it startled him. And he says, let me get his quote. Hang on. I don't want to misquote this hero. He said, "I saw an AR-15 and I was like, this kind of startled me, again, with the events that just recently happened in a grocery store up in Colorado. So I went to the clerk at the customer service desk working at the time, and I let them know that a guy had just got into the bathroom with an AR-15 and a cache of weapons." He said it wasn't acted on right away, and I was actually they took it a little more lightly than I thought they should, especially with recent events here. And so they didn't do anything about it. And so he ended up calling 911. And then the police came. This was in the Atlantic Station store, if you live in Atlanta, if you know that area. And then the police came, and the police actually caught this 22-year-old kid who had a semi-automatic weapon, a rifle, a shotgun, and 4 handguns, wearing body armor with a cache of ammunition, according to the police. And this guy who was attempting to do something in the way of another mass shooting in this store in Atlantic Station in Atlanta was arrested for reckless conduct. Reckless conduct, not attempted premeditated murder, not unlawful, no, reckless conduct. Oh my God. So this is the problem that we have in this here country. It's a uniquely American problem. Well, last night, there was a ruling that came from the Federal Appeals Court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. This might shock you.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Here's a little snippet from Fox News. This is John Roberts.
These are not weapons of war. These are not assault rifles. These are semi-automatic weapons. They just look different.
They just look different, everybody. So buy as many as you want. It's like, listen, if you think these weapons are anything less than lethal warfare, then your idea of paintball is dangerously out of line. I mean, like, you are out there. These are just semi-automatic weapons. They just look different. Yes, they just look like the kind of thing that could kill a bunch of people in a few seconds, because that's what they are. They just look different. Different than what? Than things that don't kill you? Different than what? My meatloaf? Which we're having tonight. I make the best. Different than what? What do they look different than? A plate? A knife? What do they look different than? A T-shirt? They just look different? I mean, these are not weapons of war? Let me tell you this. If you're going to have a war, these are the recommended weapons. Does that do it for you? I don't know how else to explain. Not weapons of war. So the planet is literally full of insurgents who are fighting wars in their countries with these weapons. These are not weapons of war. They just look different. I mean,
these are not weapons of war. These are not assault rifles. These are semi-automatic weapons. They just look different.
If you're fighting a war, these are the weapons you would take with you. And if you take them to a supermarket, they then become weapons of mass slaughter because there's no officially declared war. I guess this is how they're parsing it in their Republican heads over there at the propaganda news channel. Holy crap. They're just saying this stuff out loud. They're just saying it. You know, it's like they say to you, you have a right to own any weapon you want, but you don't have a right to vote. They just totally malign and mangle and mutilate what the Constitution says. Look, there is no individual right to own a gun. In this here country, we let you own a gun. And what most people want is for that privilege to be associated with a license and registration and insurance. It wasn't until Antonin Scalia came along in 2008, and we got some of the worst decisions from that one human being, where he changed the 200-year history of the Second Amendment in this country to include an individual right. There was no individual right because we know the language in there. And the language in there says a provision is necessary, right? It says that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the preservation of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It says a well-regulated militia, and it also says that if that well-regulated militia exists, it must be to preserve the free state from the foreign government. That's not an individual right. That means that the weapons that would be in America would have a relationship to the well-regulated militia, okay? And that is not what these weapons are, or that doesn't give you an individual right. It gives you a collective right as part of a militia. Okay. Now, it wasn't until Antonin Scalia came along in 2008 that we got that particular tortured interpretation of what the Second Amendment says. And we don't know why he did it, and we don't know how he did it, because nothing had changed. Nothing had changed in the history of the United States. Nothing had changed in jurisprudence. Nothing had changed since the Cruikshank opinion. Nothing had changed since the Miller opinion that said you couldn't have a sawed-off shotgun because it wasn't part of anything that would be included in a well-regulated militia's arsenal, right? In their armory, it wouldn't be anything. So anyway, nothing had changed, and all of a sudden he changed the meaning. He changed the interpretation, and it was really, really freaky that he did it. Okay, so that happened. The other weird thing that they did with this particular Supreme Court was they said money is speech. Money. It's how rich people speak. That was the Citizens United thing. So they totally destroyed any sense of public interest in this country with those two particular whacked out interpretations. But anyway, yesterday there was an appeals court decision in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is interesting because the man who wrote this opinion for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is Jay Bybee. Now, I don't know if that rings a bell for you. I hope it does, because Jay Bybee was an attorney in the Bush administration. Do you remember now, Jay Bybee? Okay, maybe you'll remember Jay Bybee because Jay Bybee wrote the torture memos. You remember him now? The Jay Bybee torture memos, the Bybee memo. The Bybee memo actually violated every treaty that we are signatories to. And it's not just that we signed them, we wrote them. Every single, the rules of war and the Geneva Conventions and all those that we wrote and we are signatories to. Jay Bybee actually trashed all that and said, well, these are extraordinary circumstances and we must be cruel. We must torture people. Okay, so that's who Jay Bybee is. Well, Jay Bybee, because he was so pro-torture, he ingratiated himself to the Bush administration, and the Bush administration nominated him, and the Republicans confirmed him to the appeals court, to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is where Jay Bybee is now. And yesterday, his federal court of appeals, in a 7-4 ruling, said that there is no right to open carry. There's no right to open carry in public. He wrote, quote, "There is no right to carry arms openly in public, nor is there any such right within the scope of the Second Amendment." This is Judge Jay Bybee. This is the Cruelty for the Sake of Cruelty's memo's author. That's who he is. Now, this was a challenge to a law in Hawaii. This was a challenge that was brought by a guy named Young, George Young. George Young sued the state of Hawaii because they denied him the right, he thought, to carry a handgun outside of his house. And the person who argued that there is no right on behalf of the United States is a guy you may know from television now. His name's Neil Katyal. Neil Katyal was the Solicitor General in the previous Obama administration. That's how long it takes for these cases to make their way through. Neil Katyal argued the Second Amendment successfully in front of the Ninth Circuit that there is no open carry right. There just isn't. And this dyed-in-the-wool conservative who believes in cruelty, who believes in torture, actually said, no, there is no such right. Chew on that.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. What are your thoughts on the president now pushing for gun control in the wake of these shootings?
Well, it's a political stunt. When he was a senator and they had an assault weapons ban, the violent crime in the United States went up. People who are unhinged are going to do things that are terrible, and it's horrible, and I feel terrible for the family of the police officers and the other families of the victims, but this gun control language is political.
I mean, let's just first of all fact check this before I go back to you, Congressman. The Brennan Center put out information, and here's the chart. The violent crime in the United States dropped during the time that the assault weapons ban was in place. You can just see it on the chart. Down, down, down it goes. The United States has the highest death rate from guns in the 32nd highest death rate from guns in the entire world. It is 8 times the death rate in a very similar country, Canada. It is 100 times the death rate in the United Kingdom. The Washington Post reports that mass shooting deaths, the body of research now increasingly suggests the 1994 law was effective in reducing mass shooting deaths.
They just lie. They just lie, and it just takes like 30 seconds to point it out. But see what happens when people watch these phone news networks is no one takes the 30 seconds to debunk them, so it just stays out there as if it were true. It's false. It is absolutely false. We had an assault weapons ban in this country for 10 long years, from 1994 to 2004. The Republicans made it sunset. They made it sunset, right? And as soon as it sunsetted, people... Now, I will admit that the assault weapons ban had a lot of loopholes in it. A lot of loopholes. There were all different kinds of weapons that, they took weapons that were prohibited and they would augment them so that they weren't that weapon. They were something else and people would buy them. But it could have, if it was before the internet also. So internet sales were not a part of the assault weapons ban because it was 1994. Yeah, stuff like that. But here we have a real dyed-in-the-wool conservative, a super conservative. Jay Bybee, you cannot get more cruel and more conservative than Jay Bybee, the author of the torture memo, who was rewarded for his cruelty by getting a federal judgeship. And there he sits on the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals writing this opinion yesterday that actually says there is no individual right to open carry in public. There just isn't. He was responding to a claimant in Hawaii who I told you sued the state of Hawaii, saying that he had an individual right to keep and bear arms. And they said, you don't. You don't. Hawaii has a law specifically targeted at residents who want to open carry. And the law says you must be licensed to do so. And this man did not want to get a license because licenses are given only to residents who can prove they need a firearm because of a reasonable fear of injury. And this man did not have that reasonable fear. And so he didn't even apply for a license. He just demanded that he had this right. And Bybee wrote, quote, "The contours of the government's power to regulate arms in the public square is at least this. The government may regulate and even prohibit in public spaces, including government buildings, churches, schools, markets, the open carrying of arms capable of being concealed, whether they are carried concealed or openly." He went on to say this: "Our review of more than 700 years of English and American legal history reveals a strong theme. Government has the power to regulate arms in the public square." 700 years of English and American legal history? 700 years. Now, you're talking back when a weapon of mass destruction was like a freaking catapult or an axe. He went back and looked, and that is not uncommon, by the way, in American jurisprudence to look back at English law because that's kind of the influence that American law had. So that's totally within bounds. But he wrote, "History is messy. And as we anticipated, the record is not uniform, but the overwhelming evidence from the state's constitutions and statutes, the cases and the commentaries confirm that we have never assumed that individuals have an unfettered right to carry weapons in public spaces." There is no individual right to open carry. There is no individual right to own a gun. It's just that one Scalia opinion. And by the way, even in that tortured, bizarre opinion that discarded all of what we call stare decisis, all precedent, that literally trampled on all precedent that Americans had self-governed with for 200 years, Antonin Scalia and John Roberts just totally said, screw it. Okay? And did this and said somehow they could find somewhere buried deep inside the constitutional meaning of the text an individual right, even though they said they could, which they can't. They still said the government is totally within its bounds to regulate any weapon. Any weapon. Regulate any weapon. And so, and then he went on to say the reason why there is no individual right, because militias. That's what he said. Because militias. Because the Constitution says a well-regulated militia being necessary for the preservation of a free state, the right exists. But if you don't need a militia, and you're not part of the well-regulated militia, and you're not endeavoring in preserving the free state from incursion, from an invasion, then you have no individual right. So I just want you to know that, because now it will have to go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did not want to and hasn't weighed in on the Second Amendment since the Scalia-Heller decision, since that tortured, heinous, ugly, horrible, unprecedented, unpredicated, unsupported piece of swill decided that there was some way, somewhere in the Constitution that you could find an individual right. There is no individual right. It's a collective right. And you only get that right when you're part of the collective. And that collective is a well-regulated militia. Duh. So we let you have your freaking stupid guns. We let you. Just like we let you have a car. But you can't have a car and drive it out in public unless it's registered, licensed, and insured. And guess what? When you sell it, you got to transfer that registration to the new owner. You see how that works? Know why? Because it ain't a right. It's a privilege. You know what is a right? Voting. Yeah. Yeah, it's in there.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
They like the way things are right now, and they simply can do nothing. They don't have to do anything. They can just sit and do nothing right now. So what are you going to do about that?
Well, the difference is, Don, no, they were able to sit and do nothing under McConnell because even though he promised, he totally backed off on that promise and never put any of this legislation on the floor for either debates or votes. There's going to be gun legislation on the floor with debates, with votes. We'll see. Our Republican colleagues, many of them know that they're on the wrong side of the issue. Where are they? They're not going to be able to hide. Maybe they will join us in legislation. Maybe they won't, and then we'll have to figure out.
Do you actually think there's a chance that a Republican will join you on gun legislation?
Well, Toomey says he's going to join. I'm not sure what he's proposing, and we want strong legislation, but they're feeling the heat. They're feeling the heat, and the reason that McConnell was never going to bring bills to the floor was because he knew a lot of them didn't want that heat. Now they're going to get it. Let's see where the outcome is, and again, we will figure out the best way to move forward, but move forward we must.
So I don't know if Chuck Schumer is being fantastical, or if Chuck Schumer thinks that all of us Americans are going to get out on the street and that we are going to, get involved, and we're going to call and we're going to protest and we're going to ask for gun legislation. I don't know what his theory goes something like this, okay? That there was plenty of gun legislation. The House passed H.R. 8 a long time ago, okay? And that the reason why H.R. 8 never, ever came up in the Senate is because Mitch McConnell knew that Republicans would have to take a hard vote, because the polling in this country clearly shows that 90%, oh my God, that is such an amazing thing, that 90% of Americans are for background checks, for stricter background checks, for background checks that are thorough, for background checks that mean something. And when I say that, I want you to understand that there are plenty of states that don't bother to report lie and try efforts, meaning people lie on the application, try to get a gun, and they're rejected, and they don't report those people, or that they don't report crime statistics to a central database, so that when a background check is conducted, if you've been, arrested for a violent crime in Mississippi, they don't report their violent crime to a database, so that person can apply for a gun, and there's going to be no record or no flag that shows up when you run their name. So people are for background checks that actually require states to report violent crime, require states to report domestic abuse, domestic violence, things like that, okay? That's not happening right now. Just so you know, that's not happening right now. And so this piece of legislation, H.R. 8, would actually make it so that the background checks are compulsory and that they have data, real data that everybody has to report. 90% of Americans are for this. And so Chuck Schumer's theory is that the reason why Mitch McConnell shelved H.R. 8 that was passed in the House when Mitch McConnell was the majority leader is because he didn't want his members to have to take a hard vote, and that it would be hard to vote against background checks for Republican members. So that's what he's saying there, and that now there's going to be a debate on background checks. Now there's going to be a vote on background checks because Schumer is the majority leader now. So that's what he thinks is, and of course, people like me and other people who are reporters or journalists or hosts of various shows. We all pay attention to this, and we know that's going to be tough to get 10 Republicans to vote for background checks. I don't know. So here's Pat Toomey saying, it's kind of up to Chuck Schumer what happens.
A big part of this is going to be, to get started, is up to Senator Schumer. Does he want to have a chance at getting an outcome, getting the 60 votes, or does he just want to see something fail so that he can use it for political purposes? If he decides the former, then we really need to take a very hard run at this. I do think there is some support that wasn't there in the past.
Oh.
If he decides that he just wants to have a failed vote, why then there's no prospect.
What does
the
that
majority
mean?
of Americans want sensible gun legislation, including enhanced background checks. My question is, though, how are you going to find some common ground and do anything on gun legislation?
Well, let me first say we're in a different Senate. After there was a horrible mass shooting, the 49 people, I believe it was in El Paso, and then the shootings in Nevada, Mitch McConnell said, we're going to debate this on the floor and vote on it. And of course, we never did.
Right.
With the Democratic majority, with, frankly, myself as leader, those days are over. We are going to put legislation on the floor of the Senate. We are going to have every senator have to say where they're going to vote. They're not going to be able to hide anymore. They are not going to be able to hide.
So that's interesting, if that's true. And, he would know because he works in the Senate, and Toomey would know because he works in the Senate. Now, Toomey said a bunch of nothing right there. However, Toomey is indicating that there is a path forward for background checks. There is a path forward for gun legislation. There is a path forward for policing people who should not have guns before they get them. That's what Pat Toomey was saying. Now, I don't know what he means, that he could either have a failed vote or he could have a successful vote. I don't know what the provisions are that the Republicans would go for versus the provisions that they won't go for. I don't know, but H.R. 8 is a gun bill that actually provides for background checks. Meaningful background checks with a requirement to report violent criminal activity in your state to a central database. It's interesting because if the people who are working in the Senate are telling us the truth about the environment in the Senate, they are saying that the only reason we haven't been able to have gun legislation is because of Mitch McConnell. Because Mitch McConnell didn't want his members to have to take a, quote, hard vote. And that now they cannot hide from the debate because the debate is going to happen. And now they can't hide from the hard vote because the legislation will be put on the floor for a vote, and they are going to have to vote. That's interesting to me. It's the most light I've seen at the end of the barrel. So, and this particular court decision yesterday at the Ninth Circuit by this conservative Jay Bybee, who was pro-torture, I mean, don't forget who he is, means that it will somehow, someday, make it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court only takes cases that are in dispute. Do you know what I'm saying? Like appeals courts disagree. And so they take the case so that they can make the ruling based on previous interpretations of the Constitution. So now we've got these crazy 7 on the Supreme Court. God help us, because this gun case will go to them. Jim in Oklahoma.
Yeah, Randy. Well, John Roberts, what he said, that those AR-15s are no different from any other gun. He's a liar.
Of course he's a liar.
They shoot ammunition. They shoot ammunition that are designed for one thing and one thing only, and that's to kill human beings.
So it's beyond kill human beings, Jim, which I think you probably know. I'm just going to jog your memory ever so slightly. When surgeons see somebody who's been shot with one of these semi-automatics, when they see somebody come in with an AR wound, they know that that patient is probably lost because it doesn't just pierce the flesh or, lodge in your neck no, it shatters organs. It literally liquefies your innards. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and when police officers respond to a shooting with a semi-automatic, they now have this procedure. It's called I think it's called a scoop and go, where they don't even call the ambulance and wait for the ambulance to respond. They just scoop up the victim and put them in the back and rush them to the hospital because that's the best chance that person will have. You can't even wait for an ambulance because the injuries are so severe.
Yes, that ammunition is designed. If you get hit in the leg, the arm, shoulder, wherever, it doesn't have to hit you in your chest or whatever.
No, it just
it is designed to kill you no matter where you're hit at.
Yeah, it shreds you is what it does. It shreds bones. It makes fragments out of major bones. It literally liquefies organs. Doctors have testified about what they see from, let's say, a handgun bullet versus a semi-automatic weapon. And they say the difference is astronomical and the survival rate is hardly. And look what happened here in Colorado. Nobody survived. Not one person survived. How sad.